Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first ever Cancer Survivor Heroes Night, brought to you by Survival Journeys. Dr. Jay Barton, you're being paged to come to the entryway here. Isn't this a spectacular facility? A recreation of Monticello, the home of Thomas Jefferson. Built by Presley Blake, the founder of Friendly's. Do you know the story of this? It's pretty remarkable. Presley Blake founded Friendly's back in 1935 and lived a very long and fruitful life. And he decided, he was always a big fan of Thomas Jefferson, and he decided he wanted to recreate Monticello. As you know, you should always follow your dreams, right? He decided to do this when he was 98 years old. That's amazing, right? It wasn't that long ago, but this is an exact almost down to every brick that you see to Monticello. There are some different variations in the way it looks, but you can see the pictures behind you there. The one of Monticello in Virginia and Monticello in Summers is pretty remarkable. But this is the house you see that's on the back of the nickel and the back of the $2 bill. It's Thomas Jefferson's home. And interesting that, like I said, Presley Blake decided to do this when he was 98. And you can imagine what this entailed and what it cost. But he told the builder, he said, I want to hold my 100th birthday party at Monticello. And if you get it done before my 100th birthday, I'll give you another $50,000. And sure enough, the guy got it done. And Presley had his birthday celebration, 100th birthday, right here. He is now 105 years old. And he is a big supporter of Survival Journeys. So that is the story of Monticello, and that's why we're here tonight. A spectacular facility for this first ever event. Of course, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Dr. Jay Burton. He's been very busy throughout this night meeting everyone, and here he comes right now, the founder of Survival Journeys, who is a survivor himself and an inspiration to us all. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Jay Burton.
Thank you all for coming. Thanks, Rich. Rich has been up since, 3 weeks ago. And we really are grateful for him to be here. And we're grateful for all of you to be here. A couple of thanks. First, a really big thank you to John and Lynn Papali, who are allowing us to use their home tonight. In addition, Rich mentioned Press and Helen Blake, who have been the major supporters of Survivor Journeys over the last 4.5 years. And we would not be where we are today without them. So even though they're in Florida, maybe we can clap and they'll hear us. So the important thing about when I give talks is I say two things. And because if I don't give definitions of these two things, people really don't understand what I'm talking about. And that is the definition of a cancer survivor is really the moment you're diagnosed, because you go into survival mode. Your life changes like that. Two, the definition of cancer survivorship, which is living before, during, and after your cancer treatment. If you know those two things, you know more than most people, whether they have cancer or not. So tonight is a celebration of cancer survivor heroes. We had a selection committee, we had 60 nominations. They came up with 6 truly remarkable individuals. And there are remarkable individuals out there who don't know about survivor journeys, who are not here, and we hope to be around for a long time so we can honor them as well. But if you have cancer and you're here and we don't know about it, we're here for you, and we want you to know that. So tonight, we decided that it would be important to honor people who have been diagnosed with cancer, have had their struggles, but have found ways to move forward and be beacons of hope for people who are struggling, who don't see that light. And so we're very proud to honor 6 cancer survivor heroes tonight, and we'll introduce them a little bit later. But we also have, and I also want to acknowledge the board of Survivor Journeys that's here. They're in their booklet, and especially one of our honorees, Candy Euler, who gives new meaning to the term perseverance. And in addition to that, we have 2 speakers, and I'll let Rich retake the microphone.
Well, thank you, Dr. Burton. I've been honored actually to be asked to be helping tonight. I had a chance to actually meet some of the folks that are being honored, whether it's Candy or Heidi or Luke or Liz. I know that Megan and Chris can't be here, but Chris's wife is here as well. Inspirational stories, and they are why people make it and why they continue the fight. And as Luke likes to say, he doesn't like to look in the past. He likes to look in the future. So he has the dreams, and we talked about Presley Blake and his dream of building Monticello, and all the people you're about to meet also have their dreams, and their dreams have not ended with a diagnosis. They continue on, and they're inspiring us today and inspiring others as well, people who are going through those same journeys. So I think, Dr. Burton, we want to introduce our first guest, Dr. Morrison, and you can tell us about her.
You can tell we practice this a lot. So, our first speaker is Clara Hunger Morrison, who's traveled that windy road we call the Mass Pike tonight to get here. And for those of you who travel the other way for your treatments, you know it's a difficult road. But Dr. Morrison has a PhD in psychology. She's worked with families. She has worked in various fields in psychology, and at this point, she is also working at a cancer survivorship clinic, one of the best ones in the country, called the Perini Center at Dana-Farber, in which she helps cancer survivor children and families live their lives. And so her perspective as a clinician is very important, because this is a growing population. Currently, within the next 3 or 4 years, there'll be more than 20, 21 million survivors. And between 1 in 2 and 1 in 3 people will develop cancer in their lifetime. So we need people like Dr. Morrison to help us get us through.
Hi. Oof, microphone. Hi, everyone. So I have some notes, so I make sure I tell my story the way I want to. But thank you all for being here. It's really impressive to see how much attention and passion goes into survivorship. This has been growing year to year. There were days when survivorship was not a topic in oncology, and it's growing, and that's really impressive. This group of people is a reflection of that. So thank you for being here tonight. So I have some personal experience in survivorship in my family, not for myself, but close to my family. And that brought me into my academic world. So I'm a clinical psychologist, like Dr. Burton mentioned. And I worked at the beginning in Philadelphia. I was at the Abramson Cancer Center. And I did work for some years at the Perini Clinic at Dana-Farber, and I continue to collaborate there closely with my colleagues. And I'm actually back into the clinical world. I went into academics for a while at the Perini Center. We were developing treatments, and now I'm using those treatments, and I'm working in primary care with a range of survivors as well as other folks and family members. A lot of survivors, once they get a few years out of the end of their treatments, end up in primary care, and it absolutely amazes me how many primary care providers are not aware of what the survivorship experience can look like, not just physically, but psychologically. So I'm a psychologist. That's what I'm going to talk about today. I want to mention that first and foremost, I'm going to be talking about one of my cases. I'm anonymizing it. His was a challenging experience. I'll be talking about that, but I first want to say, statistically speaking, most survivors do beautifully on an emotional and a social level into their survivorship years. But there are a good number of folks who really wrestle, not just in the first year or so after they complete their direct cancer treatments, but for some folks, decades after their survivorship, into their survivorship journey. So I want to talk about one of these cases because he moved me, and I think he's one of the cases that could have benefited from a survivorship community like the one that's being created with cancer or survivorship journeys. So let me tell you about my amazing Mark. That's not his name. I'm anonymizing it, but we're going to call him Mark for today. So let me follow my notes so I can tell his story right. So, Mark was diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer. I won't tell you the kind because, again, I'm keeping it anonymous. He was diagnosed in his mid-40s, actually, and he was in a pretty dire place, so he got the full gamut. He was given surgery, he had radiation, he had chemotherapy. His whole treatment was a pretty intensive year in which he was out of commission in terms of work. He was really going through it, and amazingly, his cancer went into remission. So I actually met him 2 years after the last direct cancer treatment that he had. I met him while I was providing brief therapy in one of the cancer clinics, and he came to me because he was struggling. So this has a happy ending, but let me tell you a little bit about his struggle, because we want to understand that survivorship has huge impacts outside of just the physical reaction of reality of survivorship. So, this is an amazing story. Mark was a talented visual artist. He was a painter. He did sculptures. Before his cancer hit, he was quite formidable. He was funny. He was social. He didn't just have a strong personality, he had a strong physique. He was actually a big dude before he came to meet me. And then when I saw him 2 years later, he entered my office, and he was a different guy. I didn't recognize his picture from when I Googled him. He was quite gaunt. His muscles had shrunken. He looked like a completely different guy, and this is 2 years after the end of his treatment. So he came here, and he told me that he was tired every day. It didn't matter how much he slept, he was still exhausted, and he couldn't figure out why. This was 2 years out. He said when he did sleep, he was restless. He mentioned to me that he had nightmares a few times a week. He would remember the nights when he was in the hospital, and he was scared. He actually told me, I actually thought I was going to die several times, and he remembered that frequently. This is 2 years after the end of his treatment. So he had a hard time of it. And remember, not everybody has this hard a time, but he did. 2 years post-treatment, he'd actually shut down to a certain extent. He'd withdrawn from his art. He was worried that if he recommitted himself to some of his art projects, what if he got cancer again? What if he couldn't finish one of his projects? So why bother starting? Also, he had neuropathy pretty significantly in his hands, so he had trouble using some of the tools that he used to create his art. Throughout the week, he mentioned that he'd feel tensions, he'd feel sort of muscle spasms, and he'd immediately think to himself, that must be another indication of cancer. He was thinking about this constantly. Again, 2 years out, that's what's striking here. And socially, he'd been so outgoing, he'd been fun-loving, he'd had a group of friends. He'd started withdrawing steadily from his social group. He told me he was self-conscious about his changed body. He told me that at the beginning, when he used to go out with his friends, they'd check in with him like, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? You look tired. Made him self-conscious. So he stopped hanging out. He didn't know how to handle those questions, and he didn't like constantly being reminded. He wanted to protect himself from those questions, so he stayed home. He was something beyond his cancer, but his friends couldn't see that. And then, unfortunately, cherry on the cake, his relationship with his wife was struggling as well. She had meant really well. She'd been super supportive throughout his cancer. She'd been there for him. But now 2 years in, she'd been telling him things like, hey, I'm kind of tired of this. I thought cancer was over. Why are you still in this place? And there was some friction. He didn't know how to explain it to her. He was full of shame. So her understanding was that, like Dr. Burton was saying, cancer ends when the treatment ends, but it doesn't. This can be a lifelong story for folks, and some folks don't even understand that, and that's okay because we don't talk about it. So when Mark first came to me, he told me that his story was unique. That's what he thought. He's like, well, this is just me. I'm going through some weird thing. And honestly, we started our work by me just telling him, no, he's absolutely not alone in this. We can tell by the room here that there are a ton of survivors who maybe they don't experience everything that Mark went through, but maybe bits and pieces speak to folks in this room. And he's certainly not alone in experiencing challenges. So I mentioned some of this to him, and already a weight lifted off of him. I talked to him about the natural physical changes that can happen for some people for years after their treatment ends: neuropathy, muscle atrophy, chronic fatigue, insomnia, chemo brain. That's where we're not thinking as straight as we used to. I talked to him about how hard it can be to adjust to the, quote, new normal. I kind of hate that word, but it means so much. I think it makes sense to use it. Essentially, for him, the rug had been pulled out from under him when he got this diagnosis. And honestly, the rug had been pulled out from under him, and how do you bounce back for that? So of course it made sense that he was worried. This is never going to happen to me again, so I'm going to look out for every possible chance that I'm going to get a cancer again, because I'm not going to let this happen to me. But this was going into overdrive. He was thinking about this a lot. I let him know that there's a way that we can talk about living with cancer without despair, that we can actually take the experience and thrive from it, that we can take it and reprioritize what our life looks like, and he hadn't thought about that frame before. We talked about the fact that he can return to some of the things that he used to love to do, but maybe it looks different. For him, the idea was, I have to go back to the way I was, and if I don't, what's the point? So instead, we learned to reframe that so he could go back to his art, knowing that it wasn't going to feel the same when he holds the tools, knowing that he could get back to being physically active even though his body wasn't functioning as stably as it had been before his cancer. And besides working on just himself and how he experienced his world, we also talked about the challenges of connecting with other people in our lives post-cancer. How does he manage other people's expectations of what we're like after we go through cancer? Letting his friends know gently what he needed. Hey, guys, we're not talking about my cancer all the time. Can we go out and enjoy ourselves? I need to feel something outside of what this was, my experience. He had to assert himself. We talked about his relationship with his wife, on how to eventually tell her what he was going through and let her know that this is going to be a lifelong experience for them and she needs to be in it with him. One of the important pieces to note here was how difficult it was for Mark even to talk about some of his experience. He'd been so ashamed that what he was experiencing was unique and that there was somehow weakness in this, and that he felt nothing but defined by his cancer. The stigma of talking about survivorship is very real, and we see that for a lot of folks. Certainly I do. They're the folks who come to my office, right? This was the first time he'd felt accepted about what he was going through. We worked on his chronic fatigue. We paced him back into a new normal baseline of exercise, and that's actually work that I was doing at the Dana-Farber. We were developing concrete cognitive behavioral treatments for this. We worked on his fears of cancer recurrence. There's also a huge amount of research being done on acceptance and commitment therapy, which has been found to be very effective for this. And we built up his courage to get back to what he loved, his art. I remember the first time he came back to my office one day, he had a glint in his eye, and he says, Clara, I finished my first art piece in 3 years, and this was in the time before his cancer came in. And then a few years later, he let me know by email. We'd stopped working together, but he said, Clara, I'm having an entire art display. He had a whole gamut of art pieces that he had come back to, and it had been years. He was really proud of himself, and I was for him. So to wrap things up, what's really amazing about this story, and Mark's is by no means the only one. There are lots of stories in this room alone. But what's amazing about it for Mark is that he felt better even knowing that he wasn't alone. This is why programs where survivor journeys, for instance, is so important, why nights like this are so important, why conversations that were happening tonight are so valuable. The more we talk to one another about the survivorship experience and tell our families, our medical providers, our colleagues, the researchers we bump into along the way about what life can be like after cancer, the more we can create this kind of a story for other people to connect to and ease the transition for people like Mark. And let's remember again, as much as Mark struggled, cancer survivorship is not all a struggle. There's a huge amount of resiliency and personal strength that can come out of the cancer story, not to mention personal advocacy. We not only want to learn about the challenges, but we also want to learn about the resilience that can come from going through cancer. So let's keep these conversations going. Let's keep connecting with one another over our own experiences. And hopefully the research will continue to flow in the right direction as we learn how to help folks. So thank you all for being here and for supporting the heroes that we'll be talking about today.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. That was beautiful. Next, I have the problem here of trying to introduce somebody to, in Western Massachusetts, needs no introduction. You may not recognize him right now because he's rocking a retirement goatee. But Dave Madsen has been a fixture in Western Massachusetts for over 50 years. In fact, he has just completed 50 years in broadcasting and continues to work today, even though he retired from Channel 40 back this past summer. He is an amazing man. He probably does not remember this, but when I first started at Channel 22, I was extremely young and raw. And I was gonna start on a Monday, and I had a job in Joplin, Missouri, was where I was a weekend sports anchor. And I was coming to 22 News to be the sports director. But I knew really nothing about Springfield. The only thing I knew was that the Basketball Hall of Fame was here, and that was it. So I was gonna start work on a Monday, which was Patriots Day, 1988, Marathon Monday, right? Busiest day of the year, just about. And so I went into the station on that Friday before that Monday and didn't know anyone there. I mean, I didn't know anyone. So my wife and I are like walking around the station, and in the dark, in the lobby, Dave is talking to his wife on the phone, and being Dave Madsen, the way he is, he immediately stops, said, "I gotta go." He hangs up the phone and goes, "Are you Rich?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "I'm Dave Madsen. I'm your co-anchor." And that's how I got to meet Dave, the friendliest guy in the world. And he made me feel so at home. I remember he took me to Bickford's too. Remember Bickford's? We went to Bickford's later that week, and Dave showed me some of the things around Western Massachusetts. And I'll never forget it because he was so friendly to the brand new guy. So I always try to do that when I meet new people now, when I meet people at the station. And you think about Dave's career, it's been so fantastic. Now, back when we first started, back when I started, we were at 22 News. Dave left 22 News and eventually went to Channel 40. Now, that's like the Red Sox Yankees. You know how that works. So I stayed with the Red Sox and he went to the Yankees. He's a major Red Sox fan, so I just figured I'd throw that out there. But we're still friends to this day. So, great rivals as well. He was at night and I was in the morning, eventually doing news in the morning. So obviously I know of Dave Madsen, and I know well what a great person he is and what a fantastic broadcaster he was as well. He was always just himself. The guy you meet here is just the same as the guy on the air. He's funny, he's quick-witted, he can be serious when he has to be, he can be sympathetic when he has to be. He is just the definition of a great broadcaster. And I think that's been shown by the fact that he was named to the Massachusetts Broadcast Hall of Fame in 2017. The first man from Western Massachusetts to get that honor. Dave Madsen, right there. So without further ado, not only a Hall of Fame broadcaster, but a Hall of Fame human being as well, and a cancer survivor, and he's going to tell his story for us. Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Madsen.
Well, I had notes, but I think I'm going to toss them away. I survived prostate cancer. We'll talk about that in a minute. But have any of you seen the Kaminsky Method with Michael Douglas? In one of the episodes last year, he's having prostate problems. And men who've had that, you know, you're getting up to go to the bathroom a couple of times a night, and sometimes it takes some time. So he's at a urinal, and he's standing there waiting patiently for things to finish up, and this young man comes walking up to him and does his business in about 20 seconds. And Michael Douglas looks at him and he goes, "You just wait." My introduction to prostate cancer, I'll just toss this down here, was my dad. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer when he turned 70, and that was in 1994. Back then, PSA tests weren't given all that much, and he finally had a PSA test, and his PSA was 65, which is very, very high. When a parent is diagnosed with cancer, and we really hadn't had all that many experiences with cancer up to that point in time, it was devastating. The thought of losing my father was just beyond recognition for me. But his doctor said to him at the time, "Here's your options for treatment. You can have surgery, you can have radiation, you can have seeds, or you can leave it alone, because prostate cancer won't be what takes your life." And that's the absolute truth. My dad died of esophageal cancer a few years later. Now, that said, he opted for radiation, had the treatments, and did very, very well. Well, that put a red flag up for me, because I was in my 40s and I was having those problems that I described. Now, let me tell you, having dealt with prostate cancer and having had the surgery for it, I have no modesty anymore. That goes out the door when you're dealing with something like this. So, that said, the first time I had a prostate exam, it was a shock. Any of us who've had them? Gentlemen? You wouldn't date someone like that. But you do what you have to do, and you have your PSA taken each and every year. And I did this consistently until 2004, when my PSA started to rise a little bit, and I underwent needle biopsies. The first one I had, I will never forget it. I was lying on the table, I was conscious, and the doctor said to me, "Block your ears." He said, "I will count to 3 and you'll feel a pinch." Well, apparently I tightened up at 3. And I said to him, he said, "Well, you can't do that." And I said, "Well, stop counting and just do it." So I had that done twice, and both were inconclusive. And the third one I had, they did 21 samples, and they put me out. And that's when we found out that I had very early stage prostate cancer. So my doctor was Dr. Stephen Gallo, just a wonderful guy. And he said, "Here's your options." And again, it was the same thing that they offered out for my father. So I asked him, I said, now I was 54 at the time, which is relatively young. I said, say if I opt for radiation or seeds and the cancer comes back, can I have the surgery? And he said, "No." I said, "Well, you've made up my mind for me." We were done having kids, and I had the surgery. I went to Boston for the surgery. I was willing to have it here. Dr. Gallo was doing the surgery. He said, "But I haven't done enough." This is when they were starting to do it laparoscopically. He said, "I want you to go to the guy who taught me." So I went to Dr. Douglas Dahl at Mass General. And a number of my friends have gone to him too. It's amazing the number of people out on the street who are dealing with some form of prostate cancer or prostate problems. It was over St. Patrick's Day, so I had a catheter in and I could drink a lot of beer because they told me that was good. I never had to have radiation or chemo. I'm very, very lucky. So when I see and I hear from some of your stories, I feel like I had a walk in the park compared to some of the things that you've all went through. And that was 15 years ago. And I've been cancer-free the first, thank you. I'd go for a PSA every 6 months for 5 years. And then after 5 years, Dr. Gallo said, "Well, I can only see you once a year." And after 5 more years, 10 years out, he said, "I don't need to see you at all. Just have your PSA taken every year." That was my experience with prostate cancer. The mistake I made I never acknowledged that I had cancer. And it took me a good 6 months. I was having some issues with it afterwards. It was just like, well, I had a problem and we had it taken care of. But the fact is, I had cancer. It may have been early stage. I didn't have to go through radiation or chemo, but I had cancer. And once I finally admitted that, my recovery was fine. It just, I think what I did was I dragged out the recovery. So now I am a cancer survivor. My wife is a cancer survivor. She was diagnosed with kidney cancer in 2014. They did the surgery, they incised the cancer, and she's cancer-free. My dad, as I mentioned, died of esophageal cancer. And what I say to all men, and I've had at least 4 men call me in the last month, and they're dealing with prostate issues about what I went through. One of the benefits of being on television was the fact that I did a 5-part series on it, just to make men more aware that you have to be proactive about your health, your prostate health. There's nothing embarrassing about it. It's just like taking care of yourself. We all know many men our age, I just turned 68, that ignore any signs. Well, if I go to the doctor, they're going to find something. Well, in my mind, I'd rather have it found and taken care of than have it diagnosed when it's well into it's stage 3 or stage 4. And that's with any kind of cancer. Along those lines, the fact that my dad died of esophageal cancer, I had been dealing with acid reflux in my 30s, since my 30s. My son had too. My son in Florida, 32 years old. He had a surgery 5 years ago called a Nissen fundoplication. It's hard to say. But where they take part of your stomach and they wrap it around your esophagus so the acid doesn't come up. It stops it. Well, I had that done 2 years ago. It was proactive because I didn't want to go through what my dad went through. We saw it with him, and it was just, it was hell. It really was. And he also had Parkinson's, so the Parkinson's symptoms kind of masked the pain that he would have had from the esophageal cancer, and he wasn't diagnosed until late, and we weren't going to have that. And my son-in-law, Greg's husband, in June, late May, early June, and this is you were talking about recognizing symptoms. He had had night sweats and a couple of rashes. Ignored them. Just, and he's 37. Well, all of a sudden, he was having a hard time breathing, and he works for a medical office. And so his doctor sent him to the emergency room. Well, it turned out he had a collapsed lung that was filled with fluid and a mass the size of his fist up here. He was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma at 37. He underwent chemo. He's having radiation now, and they say he will have a full recovery. So you just never, ever know. So I say to all men and all women, don't ignore the symptoms. Don't ignore them. I mean, if something's not right, if you're not feeling right, your body's better than anyone else. Don't ever ignore it. I think about it every now and then, yes, that I did have prostate cancer, but what I like about what I did for a living and what I continue to do now is to be an advocate for men, no matter what your age, especially if there's a family history of prostate cancer. And I'm on my son, who just turned 41, to have his check, and he will, because I'll bring him there. How life can change with that cancer diagnosis. But the fact is Dr. Burton, you were saying 1 in 2, 1 in 3 people will be diagnosed with cancer. And I'm one who believes that if you do not have cancer, you're in the minority. That I think we all have a cancer gene, and somewhere along the way something triggers it. And so when there's that trigger and you don't feel right, do something about it. Don't ever be embarrassed about anything as far as your health is concerned, because the only one who can advocate for your health is you. Anyhow, thank you for being here tonight. This is the second time since I retired that I've had a tie on. It feels weird. And this too. So Rich, when you retire, you can grow one of these too, My wife hates it, by the way. But thank you. Congratulations to all of you being recognized tonight. It's an honor to be here with you. The fact is you just keep up the good fight. For those who haven't been diagnosed, for those who have been diagnosed and we've lost, and for those who are still keeping up the good fight. Thank you all.
Dave, you're better without a script. If we had only known, right? All these years, we've been working on scripts our whole lives, and it's better without it, no doubt about that. Now we are here to meet our heroes for the night, our 6 heroes who are being honored as cancer survivor heroes. And once again, let me bring back Dr. Jay Burt.
So, before we get to that part of the program, I just wanted to let people know that our major sponsors tonight were Trinity Health of New England, St. Francis Medical Center, Johnson Memorial Hospital. We have a plaque for the representatives, Lynn Rossini and et al. We're really appreciative, and more even so that they understand that cancer survivorship is a thing that we have to make better. So we'll make sure. We also have a plaque, small plaque for the Papalis and the Blakes. And again, really, thank you, Lynn, John, Press, and Helen, very much. So as I said before, we're honoring 6 people tonight. The first really is a very special among all the special people that are here tonight, and that's Luke Bradley. I've known Luke, I found out tonight, for about 8 years in various aspects, and I've known the Bradley family as well. Luke is a 3-time survivor of acute lymphocytic leukemia. He has had struggles, but he has persevered. He has made many friends along the way who recognize what he has done, but more importantly, what he will do. And we are not going to go over all the intricacies of everyone's bio, but suffice to say that Lucas is an inspiration to people much older than him. So, Luke Bradley. Did you want to say anything? Yeah, it's okay. So we're going to take a picture. Ryan, do you want to say something? Luke's dad and mom, Ryan and Nikki, are here. And Ryan would like to say a couple of words.
Pediatric oncology, I guess, well, any oncology, any cancer is unique in its own right, but there's something about when your child goes through it that it can really rip a family apart. So Luke, when he was first diagnosed, I first met Dr. Burton. We were talking about survivor journeys, and then I kind of fell off the map a little bit because he relapsed. And when Luke relapsed, he got meningitis at the same time, which was a very, very tough combo to have no immune system, be under chemo, and then have meningitis kind of ravaging through your head. So Luke spent almost 15 months in the hospital, primarily in the ICU, with 9 neurosurgeries alone just to stop the swelling that had happened, and some amazing doctors over at Boston Children's who were able to open up and make pathways in the flow of the cerebral fluid to allow a shunt to be put in finally at the 9th neurosurgery, kind of at the final call. So right after that happened and we thought we were through the woods, he relapsed again because his treatment had been so compromised. And then something very interesting happened. It turns out that he needed a bone marrow transplant, and I, his father, was a 100% match, which is very rare. So without going into long medical things, especially with doctors in the room, obviously when one parent gives 50% of the DNA or genes or whatever it is, docs, and the other parent gives 50%, it's very unlikely for a parent to be a 100% match. But I was. And I would say it was a gift that I was able to give, except really it was a gift I was able to receive in order to be able to do that. And so Luke would like to always joke with me that he's Dad's boy because we have this special bond, but no offense to his mother, right? But we learned a tremendous amount through surviving. We learned a tremendous amount through cancer, but you learn a tremendous amount through surviving, too. And whatever phase or capacity that looks like, still wrestle with the anxiety that comes. It doesn't go away even when you think you're out of the woods. Every bruise takes on a different meaning than it used to, even in my other kids, because I can't separate that in my own head. But the strongest of the bunch is definitely Luke. He's by far stronger than me, by far stronger than my wife. He'll be the one that looks and says, "It's fine, Dad, it's just a bruise." You know, to meet him is to be inspired. He has a tremendous amount of faith, a tremendous amount of love, and a tremendous amount of strength. I have yet to meet anybody that knows him that hasn't been inspired by him. And as I said to Rich earlier when we were talking, I will be in random places and somebody will come up and say, "Oh, you're Luke's dad. I just want you to know how much his story has inspired me." So if I could close by adding this thought, survivorship, I don't think just helps the survivors. I think it helps those who maybe haven't had cancer but are looking to find some inner strength themselves. And they may look at what we survived through, what Luke survived through, what you survived through, and find hope for whatever they're battling for, because everybody's trying to survive something. And so with that being said, I commend everybody here, and especially my son and his strength. Thank you.
Really beautiful words. And a really beautiful family. When we came up with this concept earlier in the year, we thought it would be great for our organization because it really was truer to our message. And then we sent out requests for nominations. And we got amazing nominations. We couldn't honor everyone. But what we found is we learned as a physician, as a cancer survivor, as a doc who takes care of cancer survivors, I learned more each day from people who have gone through their cancer journey. Our next recipient, or honoree, is Liz Wilson Greer. Liz has a type of cancer called a sarcoma, but it's really something that only about 800 people in the world have been diagnosed with. And the challenge for that is immeasurable. But she's thriving. She's enjoying her music. It gives her hope. And we are so happy that she's here with us tonight. Liz Wilson Greer.
Hi, everybody. I worked behind the camera for a lot of years, so I don't like being in front of the camera. I was a makeup artist for Chanel for a long time and traveled for them and was an esthetician, and it's always fun to do that, but I don't like having anybody looking at me. So anyways, I'm very honored to be here tonight. I'm on my 4th recurrence with that rare cancer, and I was first diagnosed when I was 39, and it's a kind of cancer that can start when you're in your teenage years, they actually think. So amazingly, I had a lot of illness before I ever knew I had cancer. Dave was talking about symptoms. I had asthma so bad that I would get pneumonia 3 or 4 times a year, right, Mom? And started when I was in my teenage years. And when I got my first tumor removed, my cancer went away, my asthma went away almost. So it's amazing. I guess for me, the biggest thing is I'm so inspired by Luke. You're my hero tonight. I couldn't have kids of my own, and it's just amazing that you're here and you're cheering me on. That's a beautiful thing. I'm studying music. I was in nurse practitioner school, and I had switched careers after the second cancer, and my husband looked at me one day, and he said, "Why are you in nursing school?" And I was enrolled at Mass General, which is not a bad place to go for nursing school. And it was a second bachelor's and master's combined, pretty competitive program to get into. And I said, because I want to be a nurse. And he said, no, you don't. He said, you want to do something else. What do you want to do? And I said, well, I'd love to do music, but I don't read music. So I said, I can apply, but, you know, it's not going to happen. And I have a strong faith, and I believe that God put some things in my path throughout my journey. And anyways, I applied to one school. I figured, what the heck, I'll apply to one school. Sent in an audition tape. Got home from my 3rd cancer surgery and radiations, and there was my acceptance letter to UMass Lowell for grad school for music. So I really enjoyed the music here tonight. That was fantastic. And we moved back out here a few years ago, and I'm glad. My dad passed away a couple years ago, but my mom is going to be 83 next month, and glad to be close to her. And my husband's kids all live around here, so it's a good thing. And a couple of things real quickly. You know, I think what keeps me going is my hopes and my dreams. I'm in music school at Westfield State now. I'm getting a 2nd bachelor's there. And love it. Anybody wants to go to music school, come and talk to me. That's the place to go, right there. And it's the best bargain in the whole state, too, by the way. So, and we're the only all Steinway school in all of the 7 surrounding states. So it's an amazing place to be. And also the state, even though I've had cancer 4 times, wants to give me kids to adopt. So as soon as I'm feeling well enough, I'm going back to classes to finish my training up for that. But, you know, I know that every day is just a day at a time. And I feel like I'm still here so that I can help some other patients with my disease. I've met up with 2 other people that have my cancer, and we talk frequently online. And there's a lady in England that I talked to who was her first diagnosis last year. And I know how terrifying it can be. But I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be alive. And I'm here to be happy, joyous, and free, not to be miserable. And I tell my doctors that all the time. So, thank you.
Our next honoree is someone I've got to become well aware of in the last few months, as Candy Euler has actually joined the board of Survivor Journeys and has moved us in directions that I didn't know we could move. You know, Candy has had 2 separate cancers, one an osteosarcoma of her leg when she was about 14, and had to have an amputation. She also had breast cancer at age 47. And then She had complications from her cancer treatment, from her breast cancer. From the osteosarcoma? Okay, sorry. But what it did was it caused issues with her heart, and she had to have a heart transplant. And I can tell you, she runs circles around me. She's been involved with the Jimmy Fund Council of Western Mass for years, and they know how special she is, and now Survivor Journeys does. So, Candy Euler.
I'm very excited to be here. I am going to do a Dave. I'm not going to go by script. I live my life one day at a time, so today is today, and I'm very, very grateful. At 14, and I'll do the Reader's Digest version of Candy Euler, I got bone cancer, osteosarcoma, and it was my freshman year of high school. Terrible time. The survivor issues are crazy. They have grown so much in the last 44 years. I'm 58 if you're trying to do the math. What they did in 1975 is different than what they do today. I was a Jimmy Fund patient. I was a Boston Children's Hospital patient, which my father would say if he were here today, he'd give his life for, because he made a deal with them to save me, and they saved me. So, you know what I mean? The chemo back then caused cardiotoxicity, which was a new term, and even in the last few years, people don't understand it. But it's being widely accepted right now, and I always had to watch my heart. You know what I mean? The good thing about survivorship and having people focus on for survivorship is they could tell me at age 30 to get a baseline for my mammogram. They could also tell me, you know, these are the different things that will happen. You'll have to be followed every year for your heart. I was like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? When you're 14, you don't think about that. You know, so you go off and live life, and I did my own thing. And then, you know what I mean, I went into congestive heart failure. I didn't know it was congestive heart failure. And I was in my 30s, and I was working a large job at the time, and I had to leave it briefly to be able to take care of myself. I think what survivors need to do is put themselves first and listen to their bodies. There are people out there to help. I was blessed that the Dana-Farber had just started this Perini Clinic, which was for survivorship, and I'm blessed about that. I'm also, you know what I mean, I feel like a poster child, but I'm really not. You know what I mean? I'm Candy Euler, and this is just me, and I can laugh about it. You know what I mean? I think the speakers so far have shared my whole life story, so it's not like I have to share anymore. Breast cancer was different for me when I hit 43, and none of my friends knew about breast cancer when that happened. So we had a luncheon, and we talked about breast cancer. We did the American Cancer Society, and the Dana-Farber supported me, and I did Simply Pink. This was before it was a rage. And we were all educated. We learned, but we are there for each other. Again, you know what I mean? I think it's community, and I think it's people who help people that will learn in this journey. You know who your friends are. You know who, you know what I mean, gets it, but they don't know they're going to need it in the future. After that event, for example, there was like 10 women out of that group of 100 that ended up with breast cancer. And because of what we did with education, we were able to help them on their journey to be able to, you know what I mean, be a beacon? I don't know, but to not be fearful. I think people are so fearful that when they get cancer, when I got cancer the first time, it was still not talked about. It was the C word. You know, and it was cancer, but if you're trying to put that together. And it was just a crazy time back then. So, you know what I mean, advance to the breast cancer, have another learning experience, get through it, have a mastectomy. All of my friends, I was like, show and tell. Oh, feel it, feel it, feel it. You know what I mean? But I think if you know what I mean, and I do it with children with my leg, and I try to help people with disabilities because I fall into different categories now. So, you know what I mean? And then being able to talk about the breast cancer and making it real for people, and that's what survivors do for each other. You know what I mean? If I'm going to show you, or if I can talk to you, or if you need a mentor, I can tell you. My story is not your story, but we all have something in common. The big kicker was, you know, like you said, you're always worried what to do next. By the time I was 30, I didn't think anything was going to happen. Well, I thought something was going to happen. You know what I mean? I too can't have children, Liz, but I have found children in my life to make and give me the most joy, and I feel so blessed. So I think you can create your own family, and I always do believe in hope, and I'm very optimistic and I'm positive. Having the heart problem wasn't cancer. I had cancer twice and I beat it. Having the heart problem was a little different because it was a chronic illness. And from a survivor's perspective, I just used the tools that I used when I had cancer. And I had a great team, a support team, and I know people going through it right now. You have a team of people who are going to lift you up. It's an exhausting ride. The journey is not easy, but you do get through it if you do it one day at a time, and with faith and with love of all the people around you. You know, you can't do it alone. And that's why we have events like this. That's why we have research. That's why we invest money to find a cure for cancer. It's just crazy. You know what I mean? I got the heart transplant last year, and I'm living proof. And my world is different. You talked about having a different life. Who are you today? My physical therapist says I'm Candy 2.0. I'm no longer Candy Euler. I'm Candy 2.0. And I have to listen to what Candy 2.0 has to do versus what Candy did before. And it's navigating a whole new journey for me. But I'm not alone. And you know what I mean, for everybody here, thank you for this award. And Jay, thank you for allowing me to be part of your survivor journeys. It's an honor. Thanks.
Great thing about having a program is I can actually follow it. I don't have to decide who goes in what order. Our next honoree is Heidi Hoon Partain. Heidi, I've met through another good friend, friends Jay and Joanne Presser. She's been involved in the local Rotary in Suffield for years, and she's become a really good friend. Heidi is a lung cancer survivor, never smoked, and more people have been diagnosed in that manner. She is also someone who's involved in home health care and started her own company, and often puts, or actually always puts, others ahead of herself. She's very active. She's been a nice person involved in survivor journeys through the years. And like I said, I welcome my friend up here.
Thank you. So many of you, Jay, but also Luke and Liz and Carrie and Megan and Chris. Thank you for being here. I have, for the first time in a long time, almost all of my warrior women gathered together. And these are an amazing group of women who got me through cancer therapy, fed my children, who are now both taller than me. And they were little small people when we had the diagnosis, but they're now gigantic, gorgeous, wonderful, successful women. My coworkers and my friends who took me every day, every week, and who gave me the fake out that I could actually still work and not let chemo brain overtake everything. And they did a beautiful job. They waited years to tell me that they were faking my work, which was brilliant. But I'm so appreciative and grateful for the honor. The Suffield Rotary, who has been a huge supporter of me, who believes in service above themselves, who believes in me in service above ourselves. So join your local communities. It makes a difference. But I'm so particularly blessed and thankful for this honor, and to be able to live life after cancer. Because the survivors are not just the 6 of us here being honored, and Jay, who won't ever take the honor for himself, but for all of you who have helped us through, because survivorship is not an individual individual event. It's a team event. We don't get from here to there once, twice, or 3 times, Miss Lurie, without a team. Some brilliant surgeons and medical practitioners, but also people who will pray with us and cry with us and fake it out with us, because there are just days we need to lie to ourselves. So thank you for that. I believe very much in gratitude and faithfulness and the opportunity that comes from survivorship, because we didn't know yesterday that today would come. And gosh, today was great. And you know what? Tomorrow is going to start all over again. And we get another one of those every single day. Even on the crappy days, tomorrow looks a whole lot better than today. So thank you for that. Please join Survivors' Journeys, or those you love and those who don't yet know they're going to have this journey. Because unfortunately, half of us will. If you haven't had a lung cancer x-ray, please do so. It's less invasive than a mammogram or a colonoscopy or anything else. Get that expletive deleted baseline, because lung cancer is fast growing and super easy to manage if you get it ahead of time. It's not a sneaker cancer if you look for it. If you don't look for it, it'll sneak up on you. So that's my little moment of advocacy, and join more of us as survivors and get more of those out there to join us on this side of the fence. So thank you, Jay.
So, as most people will understand in their lives, life does not always follow a path. So our next honoree, Megan Rothschild, could not be with us tonight. Megan was someone who was diagnosed with malignant melanoma, which is a skin cancer, when she was in college. She has taken the road to advocacy, working with Impact Melanoma, as well as advertising in her public relations firm. So she had a previously scheduled appointment tonight, couldn't be with us. She knows that we're thinking of her and that we're very proud of her, and we'll get this to her. Maybe not this one, maybe the one over there, because this one I'm holding, and our next honoree, Chris Tebow, is a gentleman who has stage 4 breast cancer. So I'm sure a lot of people are learning about different types of cancers tonight, and that some of our preconceived notions fall by the wayside very often. Chris is actively working in his video production company, and today was a tough day, and he needed to take some time off. But we are very fortunate to have his wife, Missy, be with us today. It is tough when cancer hits the individual, but as people have said tonight, it's just as tough on the family. We're not specifically honoring cancer caregivers tonight, but they need to be honored every day because they get us through. They take care of us when we're not able to take care of ourselves. And they do it selflessly, and they're not honored enough. And we'll go have a board meeting, and we'll talk about that, because we need to honor those people too, because that's part of cancer survivorship. It's an integral part of cancer survivorship. So I just want to take one word and 1 minute to thank the people that nominated our honorees today. I haven't brought them up because I just had a senior moment and just forgot. But these are people who recognize how special our honorees are. And even if they're not the caregivers, they're the friends, and they're also the people that keep us going. So without further ado, Missy Tebow.
Dave, like you said, you at one point in your speech, you said, we underwent. And then you said, oh, well, I underwent. I get that, because I'm constantly, well, today I had, no, I didn't. He did. But it's just a we thing. When you have a team behind you, that's obviously why you said we, because, I mean, it's raw and it's real and it's us. It's all of us. And just, my husband couldn't be here today. He's pushing it a little bit. When he feels good, he just wants to go and, conquer the world and keep on doing what he always did. And he's learning that he's got to try to slow down a little bit before his body really tells him that. So it's a work in progress, and he's learning as we go, and he's doing a fantastic job, and I couldn't be more proud of him. And I'm honored to be here today to stand here and tell you why I believe that he was worthy of this honor. He was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2013, and it was surreal. Even with the day he had his biopsy, he was like, oh, watch out, don't bump into my breast cancer. Like, yeah, right, this can't be breast cancer. This can't be breast cancer. But it was. And once it was removed and everything was all said and done, we were like, it's behind us and here we go. And we got married and we had a couple kids, and he was a stepfather to my son first, and then we had 2 babies, and just kicking butt in our video production company and conquering the world. And just over a year ago, it came back. And now his breast cancer is metastatic breast cancer. It is now in his lungs, it's in his bones, in his spine, up and down his spine, his ribs. I mean, it's all over the place. But it's not consuming him. It's not everything in him. He is unreal, really. So his brother he went into, okay, if I'm gonna die, I have a family of 5. How am I gonna make money? And I went into, how am I gonna cure cancer? Like, I'm gonna cure cancer, and he's gonna make all this money, and I don't even know, we were on 2 separate pages. And then his brother, who was battling stage 4 melanoma for 10 years, it just popped up in the wrong place. I was like, okay, he's good, he's not. He's good, he's not. He's good, he's not. And then he wasn't. And then it got real. When he sat there next to his younger brother in the hospital for 2 weeks and watched that, then all of a sudden he turned around and said, okay, now what other doctors did we find, and what else am I eating and doing, and what are we doing? Because this is no joke. So we lost Brandon, and I know without a shadow of a doubt that we don't just have a guardian angel. We have the most ridiculous cancer coach up there going, okay, we're not gonna let this happen again, let's go. So we have been learning how to be our own advocate, because that's the only option. It's not one doctor, one appointment, God bless every single doctor, but taking the time to say, okay, naturopathic doctor, integrative care, what does that mean? And what is his specific cancer? And what does this look like? And what is that gonna, and not everything works for the same person, not everything works for the same cancer, and just all of a sudden you become not just a mom or a father or a son or this or that, you become a researcher. And you just say, what can we do? Like, and his strength and his perseverance is unreal, just as everybody else in this room, really. I'm honored to be here for him. He's sad that he couldn't be, but he's listening to his body. He pushed a little bit, he's resting a little bit, so I'm happy to be here to say, like, let's kick butt. Let's just keep on kicking it, and let's be our own advocates, and let's do it.
I also want to recognize in our program, we had a selection committee that went through 60 nominations. I read every nomination. I am so happy I was not on the selection committee. They did an amazing job. And like I said, Survivor Journeys, we represent all cancer survivors and caregivers. So thank you to the members of the selection committee that are listed in your program. So one of the advantages of actually owning the home that the event takes place in is if you want to talk, you get to talk. So Dr. John Papali would like to say a few words.
Listen, it's late, so I'm going to start out with my favorite quote from Thomas Jefferson, and I know all of them. But this is his favorite. This is my favorite quote. Never, never use two words when one word will do. So we're going to be short. First of all, Liz and Candy and Megan and Heidi and Chris and Missy, you guys are unbelievable. I can't believe it. But there is one person who really touched my heart tonight, and that was Luke. And for a couple of reasons. Many of us have had children, and my 3 children are between 27 and my daughter will be 32 next month. And whenever they had a little cut or a little bruise or any little thing, and there, you saw a tear, it broke your heart. This gentleman has been through more than probably all of our children combined. And so he said something to me earlier, and for a couple of reasons, I cannot forget it. And one of the reasons is that because I had children, and my children had their usual issues, just like we all did, but nothing like Luke. And the second one is that my mother, who passed away in 2013, one of the things she did every year since the hospital opened was donate to St. Jude's Children's Hospital, which was started, people of my generation will remember Danny Thomas. And she was very religious. And every year, and believe me, my parents were not rich people, but she donated every year to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. And when I saw Luke, he said to me, he says, I bought some raffle tickets for those Red Sox games, and I hope I win. And so I went up to Jay and I said, and actually it didn't occur to me that they were raffle tickets. He said, I hope I get the Red Sox tickets. So I went up to Jay and I said, where's the silent auction for the Red Sox tickets? And then I found out that in fact it was a raffle. And I remember the first time I took my boys to their first Yankee Red Sox game. And so I hope you win those tickets, Luke, but here's the deal. If you don't, you're going anyway, because I know the guy who owns this house, and and I'll tell you, even if and I said, if you look on the thing, it says, what the fair value is, and it says priceless. Look, even if he has to take out a second mortgage, you're going, okay? All right, I promise you that. All right, enough there. All right. So here's the second thing. John Kennedy, well, let me take one step back. So Thomas Jefferson was considered really our most, now some of you went on this private tour with me, so you can't answer this question, but Thomas Jefferson was considered one of the most intelligent presidents that we've ever had. He was considered actually the second most intelligent, not the first, so it really raises the question of who was the first. I will give you a hint, it's not Donald Trump, okay? But in 1963, John Kennedy, who was our president at that time, he had a dinner, and this is a true story, and Rich Teddemer, we were talking about it before, for all of the Nobel Prize winners in the Western Hemisphere, the United States, Central America, Mexico, South America, anyone who had won a Nobel Prize and was living, or their spouse, if the recipient had died, could come to a White House dinner with John and Jackie Kennedy, quite an honor. And the place was filled with these people. And he hit the silverware and against the goblet and said, I want to make an announcement. He says, this is the most incredible collection of the most intelligent people who have ever dined at the White House since Thomas Jefferson has dined alone. And that's a true story, and it's a true quote. You can look it up. But talking about that, this isn't the White House, but it is the house that Thomas Jefferson lived in. And we're going to ask of you, so all of these awards and everything that everyone is here for, what we're really about is to raise some money for people who have cancer. This is the bottom line. And I want to thank all of you for coming. You've all, I come here every day. You paid money to come here, and look, you're unbelievable. But I'm going to ask you for some more money. But I'm going to give you something in return. And here's the deal. It turns out that there are just a few rooms in this house that are exactly the same as the real Monticello. And one of them is the dining room. And not too long ago, there was a billionaire sitting in that dining room, and we gave him, he was here for a birthday party for him, and it turns out that he turns 105, and I won't tell you who it is, but some of you might be able to guess. And this is a guy who's had a lot of incredible meals at a lot of incredible restaurants, knew personally people like J.C. Penney from J.C. Penney, Ray Kroc from McDonald's, and so many others. And he said it was the best meal he ever had. I didn't cook it. But we brought somebody in. So we're going to auction off a dinner at Monticello, live auction right now, dinner at Monticello for 12 people in the dining room. And whatever you bid on it, I know it's going to be the best dinner you ever had, and I'll do, if you're not satisfied, I'll give you back half your money. I'm not going to give you back all of it, but I'll give you back half. Well, actually, I'll donate it to Survivor Journey, but there's got to be something wrong with it. You just can't, you got to. So here's this. So we're going to start out with this auction, and if you can do that. And remember, this money is for people who are really less fortunate than us. Okay, this doesn't go to their medical care per se. There's a lot besides getting medicine and chemotherapy and surgery, dealing with cancer. You got to go to the appointments. There's so much more, and a lot of people don't have what we all have. So I'd like to start out the bidding so this is for 12 people, and you can pick the date. The house will be yours, and if you're interested, I'll give you the most incredible tour of Monticello you've ever had and bore you to death with U.S. history. But we'll start the bidding at $500. Do I have anyone that will do $500? Okay, we have somebody for $500. Anybody for $1,000? $1,000. Anybody for $1,500? Well, tell them to come in. Tell them to come in. You come out, everybody who's interested in coming in, you really should do this because this is it. I'm not going to do this ever again. I'm serious. I've known Jay Burton. What are we up to? We were looking for 1,500. Anybody for 15? 2,000. 2,500. 2,500. Anybody for 3,000? 3,000. Anybody for 3,500? 3,500. Anybody for 4,000? 4,000. Anybody for $4,500? 45. Okay, now listen. Here's what we're going to do. All right, you guys are unbelievable. So, if we reach $5,000, we'll do 2 dinners. Okay, so there's no losers here. I'm looking for a bid of $5,000. Anyone else for $5,000? It's tax deductible. You get to eat here. You get the most incredible and the most incredible food. The most incredible $5,000. Two dinners for $5,000. $10,000 to Survivor Journey. Good night. Thank you. You guys, you're incredible. You're incredible.
And all we're giving you is a little plaque. Yeah, that's amazing. John, Lynn, thank you. You can tell that this is a special evening, and I want to thank all of you for being a part of this. Missy, please tell Chris we miss him. We'll tell Megan we miss him. But now, we also are going to have the results of the raffles and the silent auctions. And tell me what I'm supposed to do. I don't know.
Thank you very much. If you could all bid, this is all for charity, and people haven't been going over to the silent auction items. We have some wonderful items that were donated in love to help out the education and everything that Survivor Journeys does. So if you could spend some time, we will close the auction. I don't know what time it is. I know we're off our program a little bit. Okay, 12 minutes, we'll close it, so bid and bid well.
Thank you, everyone.